The afternoon sun, a relentless golden hammer, beat down on the cracked asphalt of the city's sprawling downtown plaza. It shimmered off the gleaming glass facades of towering office buildings, reflecting a world of ambition and commerce that felt a million miles away from the faded, peeling paint of the old storefronts lining Liberty Street, Jamal's home turf. For Jamal, a lean, thoughtful 16-year-old, navigating the complex, often contradictory currents of adolescence in this sprawling metropolis, the plaza was a familiar paradox. It was a bustling, vibrant tapestry woven from the hurried footsteps of strangers, the cacophony of distant sirens, and the indifferent faces of passers-by, a backdrop to a life that often felt both exhilarating in its possibilities and overwhelming in its harsh realities. He was tall for his age, with an athletic build honed by countless hours on the neighborhood basketball court and long walks across the city, his eyes holding a quiet intensity that spoke of an observant nature and an inner world far richer than his external circumstances suggested. Jamal lived a few bus stops away, in a neighborhood affectionately known as the Heights, a place that whispered of forgotten dreams and echoed with the quiet anxieties of systemic neglect. Here, opportunity often felt like a distant rumor, a whisper carried on the wind from the glossy towers downtown. Yet within the tightly knit fabric of their community, and especially within their small, fiercely loyal trio, Jamal, his best friend Marcus, and Marcus's younger brother Leo, a different narrative unfolded. It was a story of unwavering resilience, of shared laughter that chased away shadows, and of an unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of their daily lives. Marcus, a year older than Jamal, possessed a sharp wit and a street-smart savvy that made him the unofficial strategist of their group. His quick thinking often diffused potential conflicts and navigated them through the labyrinthine bureaucracy of city life. Leo, at 14, was the youngest, but certainly not the least. He was a whirlwind of boundless energy and infectious optimism, his bright eyes and eager smile often masking the quiet anxieties that, like an invisible weight, they all carried. He had a natural curiosity for all things electronic, a trait that often led to him tinkering with discarded gadgets, much to Marcus's amused exasperation. Their summers were a kaleidoscope of small, hard-won joys and ever-present worries. While other kids their age might have spent their days at summer camps or on expensive vacations, Jamal, Marcus, and Leo found their purpose helping their elderly neighbors. They'd meticulously rake leaves for Mrs. Gable at the corner store, carrying heavy bags of groceries for Mr. Henderson, or patiently fix sputtering lawnmowers for Mrs. Rodriguez, earning a few honest dollars. These small sums rarely went towards personal luxuries. Instead, they were invariably pooled, adding a crucial few dollars to their family's stretched budgets or contributing to a rare, shared meal from their favorite local burger joint, Big Mike's, a greasy spoon with the best fries in the city, run by a kindly old man who knew every kid by name. Jamal's own mother, a single parent, worked tirelessly as a nursing assistant, often pulling double shifts, her hands rough from constant sanitizers, her eyes weary but always filled with an unwavering love. She instilled in Jamal not just a strong work ethic, but an even stronger, almost innate sense of compassion. Jamal's days were a demanding rhythm, a relentless cycle of school, family responsibilities, and the ceaseless pursuit of odd jobs that chipped away at his free time. Yet, even amidst the grind, his inherent kindness and quiet moral compass shone through, guiding his actions with an understated grace. He had an uncanny ability to spot vulnerability, a sensitivity born from navigating his own challenging circumstances. One crisp autumn evening, after a particularly grueling shift volunteering at the community center, a place he often found himself drawn to, helping younger kids with homework or organizing pickup basketball games, Jamal was walking home, his backpack slung low, the last embers of daylight fading from the sky. The air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves and the distant murmur of city life. As he cut through a small, overgrown park, a shortcut he often took, he heard it. A chorus of shrill, taunting voices, punctuated by the frantic, terrified meows of an animal. He rounded a cluster of dense bushes and saw a group of rowdy middle schoolers, their faces contorted with gleeful malice, cornering a scrawny, terrified stray cat against a rusted chain-link fence. The cat, its fur matted and eyes wide with fear, hissed desperately, its body trembling. Most people, especially after a long day, might have hurried past, unwilling to get involved, or perhaps shouted a quick, ineffectual warning. But Jamal wasn't most people. His internal moral compass, honed by his mother's quiet lessons and his own experiences, simply wouldn't allow him to. Without a moment's hesitation, Jamal intervened. He didn't yell or scold, knowing that confrontation would only escalate the situation. Instead, he calmly, deliberately approached the group, his tall frame casting a subtle shadow over them. His presence, quiet yet authoritative, seemed to ripple through the agitated air, causing the younger kids to pause their taunts, their youthful bravado flickering under his steady gaze. He didn't lecture them. Instead, his voice was low, measured, imbued with a gentle firmness. "Hey guys," he said, his eyes on the trapped cat. "What's going on here? That cat's scared. You're just making it worse." He then spoke directly to the most aggressive of the boys, his tone calm but unwavering. "Imagine how it feels to be trapped like that. You wouldn't like it, right?" As he spoke, he slowly, carefully knelt down, his eyes fixed on the trembling feline. He extended an open hand, palm up, murmuring soft, reassuring words, his voice a soothing balm against the cat's terror. He spoke not just to the cat, but to the boys, explaining the fear they were causing, painting a picture of vulnerability that they, in their youthful thoughtlessness, hadn't considered. "It just wants to be safe," he murmured, his fingers gently reaching out to stroke the matted fur. Slowly, tentatively, the terrified feline uncoiled itself, its trembling lessening as it rubbed against Jamal's offered hand. He carefully coaxed it out from its hiding spot, scooping it up gently. He sat with the cat for a few minutes, petting it, speaking in soft whispers until its frantic trembling subsided and a low purr rumbled in its throat. Only then, with the cat nestled securely in his arms, did he calmly walk away, leaving the chastened group of boys in thoughtful silence. He didn't just walk away, he took the cat directly to the local animal shelter, ensuring it would receive proper care and find a safe haven. This small, unprompted act of protection, witnessing the vulnerable and choosing, unequivocally, to shield them, was Jamal's save the cat moment. It wasn't about grand heroism or public accolades. It was a simple, profound demonstration of his innate empathy, his unwavering moral compass, and his quiet willingness to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. It was a subtle but powerful insight into the extraordinary young man he was. Beneath Jamal's quiet, responsible exterior, behind the dutiful son and helpful neighbor, lay a fervent passion, a secret dream that burned brightly in the solitary moments of his day. His worn backpack, meticulously organized, always contained a well-used sketchbook. Its pages were not filled with doodles of superheroes or video game characters, but with intricate, fantastical designs for robots, complex gadgets, and sleek, futuristic vehicles that seemed to leap directly from the pages of science fiction. His mind was a restless engine of innovation, constantly whirring with creative solutions to problems, a natural inclination for engineering and a deep fascination with how things worked. He would spend hours in his small room, a miniature workshop filled with discarded circuit boards scavenged from old VCRs, tangled bundles of multicolored wires, and the faint metallic scent of solder from his rudimentary soldering iron. Old, broken electronics, salvaged from dusty attics or thrown out bins, were his treasures. He would meticulously dissect them, studying their inner workings, then, with a focused intensity, reassemble them into something new and unexpected. A rudimentary voice recorder, a remote-controlled car fashioned from old toys, a blinking light contraption that seemed to have no discernible purpose beyond his own fascination with its mechanics. He devoured every book he could find on physics, advanced mathematics, and mechanical engineering. Library finds be damned. The pages, filled with complex diagrams and abstract theories, were his portals to a world of endless possibility. His mind was a perpetual motion machine, constantly buzzing with innovative solutions to complex problems, an intuitive grasp of principles that eluded most adults. This clandestine pursuit, this quiet dedication to understanding and building, was his seed of mystery. It hinted at a prodigious, untapped talent, a nascent genius that longed to break free from the practical confines of his daily life. His designs weren't just idle fantasies, they were meticulously drawn schematics, each line precise, each component labeled, revealing a rigorous, self-taught discipline. This was the true Jamal, a young man brimming with imaginative spirit and technical brilliance, waiting for the right spark, the perfect opportunity to ignite his full potential and launch him into a future far beyond the boundaries of Liberty Street. The sweltering summer air, thick with the scent of exhaust fumes and the distant tinny strains of boombox music, usually felt like pure, unadulterated freedom to Jamal and his friends. It was the season of endless afternoons, of pickup basketball games that stretched until dusk, and of the easy camaraderie that only long shared days could forge. But lately, a different kind of heat had begun to simmer beneath the surface of their lives, the intensifying pressure of circumstances far beyond their young control. This wasn't the fleeting discomfort of a summer day. It was the slow, insidious burn of impending crisis, creeping closer with each passing moment. The first tremor of trouble had begun subtly, almost imperceptibly, before growing into a seismic shock that threatened to destabilize the already precarious foundations of their lives. It began with Jamal's mother. Her usual vibrant energy, a constant source of strength and inspiration, had begun to wane. She'd been battling persistent migraines for months, debilitating headaches that stole her energy, blurred her vision, and, most crucially, impacted her ability to work her demanding double shifts as a nursing assistant. The family's budget, always meticulously balanced on a razor's edge, began to fray under the weight of her lost wages and the rising cost of her medications. Every missed shift was a direct hit to their fragile financial stability, forcing Jamal to take on even more odd jobs, stretching his already limited time between schoolwork and the desperate scramble for income. He saw the pain in his mother's eyes, the quiet resignation, and a knot of helpless worry began to tighten in his own stomach. Then, the unexpected blow landed on Michael's family. His father, who had recently managed to secure a temporary construction job, a glimmer of hope after months of unemployment, suffered a severe fall on a job site. A sickening crack, a flash of pain, and he was left with a compound fracture in his leg, an injury that would require extensive surgery and a long, arduous recovery. The joy of a steady paycheck vanished, replaced by the grim reality of lost income, mounting medical bills, and the chilling absence of workers' compensation. Michael, usually the quiet observer, became even more withdrawn, his hands, so deft with tools, now twisting nervously. The responsibility of finding work, any work, to help his family, weighed heavily on his young shoulders, pulling him away from his beloved robotics. And for David, the ever-optimistic, spirited member of their trio, the news was perhaps the most devastating. His beloved grandmother, Mrs. Evelyn Reed, a woman whose gentle spirit and endless supply of bedtime stories had been a constant source of warmth and security in his life, received a crushing diagnosis. A rare, aggressive form of pneumonia had taken root in her lungs, requiring prolonged hospitalization, a specialized ventilator, and an incredibly expensive course of experimental treatment. The family's insurance, basic and bare bones, covered only a fraction of the astronomical costs. David, who usually bounced with inexhaustible energy, moved with a newfound solemnity, his bright eyes shadowed by a fear that no amount of optimism could dispel. He visited his grandmother daily, holding her frail hand, the sterile smell of the hospital, a constant reminder of the ticking clock. Their already fragile family finances, meticulously managed penny by agonizing penny, were suddenly overwhelmed. The costs mounted with terrifying speed. Exorbitant prescriptions for Jamal's mother, specialized medical supplies and physical therapy for Michael's father, and the colossal life-saving expenses for David's grandmother. The chilling phrase, out-of-pocket expenses, echoed from every phone call and every hospital visit, a constant, mocking reminder of their burgeoning debt. The boys, who had always found a way to scrape by, who had prided themselves on their resourcefulness and ability to make something out of nothing, now felt a crushing, profound sense of powerlessness. Their small earnings from odd jobs, washing cars, mowing lawns, running errands, barely covered their own bus fare, let alone the colossal sums needed to keep their families from drowning in a sea of medical debt and eviction notices. Each boy carried a silent, corrosive burden of guilt, a nagging whisper that they weren't doing enough, couldn't be enough to save their loved ones from the encroaching darkness. The weight of responsibility, typically carried by adults, had fallen squarely onto their young, unprepared shoulders. They watched their parents and guardians, pillars of their world, buckle under the strain, and it terrified them. The turning point, the moment of absolute, undeniable crisis, arrived with the cold, hard finality of bureaucracy and official pronouncements. For Jamal's mother, the inevitable phone call came. She lost her second night shift job because of her increasing number of absences due to debilitating migraines. The family, already sinking deeper into the red, now faced an even more precipitous financial freefall. The landlord, a stern man with little patience for excuses, issued a formal warning, followed by a thinly veiled threat of eviction if rent arrears weren't immediately settled. Michael's father's workers' compensation claim, a lifeline they had clung to, was denied. The insurance company cited a technicality, a labyrinthine clause in the policy that effectively absolved them of responsibility for the fall. This left Michael's family with not only mounting medical bills but also the devastating reality of no income for the foreseeable future. Michael's shoulders slumped, his usual quiet demeanor now bordering on profound despair. He stopped tinkering, his precious tools gathering dust. And for David's grandmother, Mrs. Evelyn Reed, the hospital delivered the most devastating ultimatum yet. Her condition had worsened, requiring an even more aggressive and expensive treatment plan, a specialized medical intervention that offered a glimmer of hope, but came with an astronomical price tag. The hospital administrator, a woman with a voice devoid of emotion, explained the grim reality. Due to the highly specialized nature of her care and the lack of comprehensive insurance coverage for this particular treatment, a significant upfront payment of $15,000 is required within 3 months to continue Mrs. Jenkins on the critical treatment list. Without this payment, we will regretfully have to explore alternative palliative options. 3 months. The words were a death knell, a countdown to losing the woman who had filled David's life with warmth, wisdom, and boundless love. The initial dread turned into a cold, paralyzing fear. They had exhausted every traditional avenue, borrowing from strained relatives who had little to spare, seeking meager community aid that offered only temporary relief, even trying to sell a few treasured, but ultimately valueless, family trinkets at pawn shops that offered barely pennies on the dollar. Every path they took led to a dead end, a closed door, a crushing refusal. The weight of the $15,000, a sum that felt like a king's ransom, pressed down on them, threatening to suffocate them. This was their collective point of no return. The terror of watching their families crumble, of seeing their loved ones suffer or, even worse, disappear from their lives due to circumstances utterly beyond their control, ignited a desperate, burning resolve within them. They couldn't stand idly by, passively accepting their fate. They wouldn't. They needed a miracle, a breakthrough, a seismic shift in their reality that no odd job, no small-time hustle, no amount of ordinary effort could possibly provide. The stakes were too high, the cost of failure too devastating. They would push themselves beyond every limit, venture into the unknown, and embrace any opportunity, no matter how audacious, how unlikely, or how dangerous it might seem, to find the impossible sums needed to save their families. They were young, yes, but their determination was absolute, fueled by love and a desperate hope. They would not surrender. Not now. Not ever. The oppressive summer heat of Liberty Street often magnified every sound, every fleeting shadow, making the already stifling air thick with the murmur of unseen anxieties. For Jackson, Michael, and David, the oppressive quiet from within their homes, now filled with unspoken worries and strained silences, was far more deafening than any street noise. Their usual playful banter, once a constant soundtrack to their days, had muted, replaced by a shared tension as they navigated the daily reality of their family's struggles, a weight that settled heavy on their young shoulders. Every laugh felt a little forced, every shared glance held a flicker of apprehension. The innocence of their youth was steadily eroding, replaced by the grim determination of necessity. The personification of the rigid, unforgiving system they were increasingly up against often materialized in the form of Officer Hayes. A white officer in his late 40s, Hayes had patrolled their neighborhood for years, his presence as constant as the cracked pavement beneath their feet. He wasn't overtly malicious. There was no outright malice in his eyes, but he carried a heavy weight of cynicism and a profound, almost ingrained distrust of kids loitering. His years on the force had perhaps hardened him, making him quick to judge, his interactions often laced with thinly veiled suspicion. He saw mischief where there was only boredom, potential delinquency where there was often only desperate hope, and a threat where there was simply the vibrant, sometimes chaotic energy of youth. Officer Hayes was a classic Type B antagonist, a product of a system that often viewed the disadvantaged with a jaundiced eye, making him a constant, low-level threat to the boys' already precarious existence. He made his presence felt, often cruising by in his worn patrol car, his eyes scanning their every move, a silent, implicit warning to stay out of trouble, to conform to the narrow box society had seemingly built for them. His occasional stops, always accompanied by a stern, questioning gaze, only served to heighten the boys' already frayed nerves, reminding them of the invisible boundaries that confined their aspirations. He represented the institutional skepticism that dismissed their potential, merely seeing them as products of their environment, rather than individuals brimming with talent and ambition. Amidst the stifling tension and the pervasive scrutiny from figures like Officer Hayes, the boys found small pockets of solace and genuine connection. These were the moments that reminded them of the inherent good that still existed, the quiet acts of humanity that buffered the harsh realities of their lives. Mr. Jenkins, the elderly, kindly owner of Big Mike's Burger Joint, was one such beacon. He'd known the boys since they were little, watching them grow from boisterous toddlers to thoughtful young men. He often slipped them an extra order of crispy fries or a free soda when they stopped by after their odd jobs, a silent acknowledgement of their hard work and the burdens they carried. He was a man of few words, his face a roadmap of a life well lived, but his quiet nods of encouragement and his unwavering belief in their good hearts were a powerful, silent support system. He saw past their worn clothes and their humble origins, recognizing their innate decency and fierce loyalty. Mr. Jenkins was a true helper, a grounding, empathetic presence who saw past their circumstances to the inherent good within them, offering comfort without pity and a quiet dignity that was deeply reassuring. His greasy spoon, filled with the aroma of sizzling patties and nostalgia, was more than just a place to eat. It was a sanctuary, a place where they felt seen and valued. The afternoon, the sleek, gleaming black SUV with deeply tinted windows rolled silently down their street was unlike any other. It moved with an almost unsettling grace, an anomaly in their world of beat-up sedans, struggling buses, and the occasional clattering delivery truck. It pulled over near a notorious pothole, a crater in the asphalt that everyone on the street knew, but no one had the means to fix. The boys, sitting on the stoop of an abandoned building, a crumbling relic of better times that they often used as their makeshift headquarters, watched with a mix of curiosity and mild apprehension. This vehicle didn't belong here. A man, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that seemed to flow around his tall, distinguished frame, stepped out. He moved with an air of immense wealth, a quiet power that radiated from him like heat from a desert road. This was Mr. Sterling, a name that echoed in newspaper headlines and financial reports. He was a renowned billionaire and real estate mogul, whose grand urban development projects consistently reshaped the city's most affluent districts, his name synonymous with power and influence. He was a force of nature in the concrete jungle, a man whose decisions impacted thousands, yet he seemed utterly out of place on Liberty Street. As he spoke into his phone, his voice a low, clipped murmur, he seemed utterly oblivious to his surroundings, to the curious glances of the few passers-by, and to the keen observation of the three boys. His frustration, however, was palpable even from their distance. The boys overheard snippets of his conversation. Flat tire, no spare, driver stuck on the other side of town. Impossible to get a tow truck here quickly. Ridiculous. He punctuated his frustration with a sharp, almost impotent kick to the flat tire of his luxury SUV, a stark image of a man accustomed to absolute control encountering an unexpected, trivial obstacle. Despite his immense power in that moment, he was utterly helpless, trapped by a mundane malfunction. Jackson, Michael, and David exchanged knowing glances. They knew this street, its quirks, its shortcuts, its hidden resources. They knew the shortcuts, the back alleys, and the particular temperament of the old tire repair shop 3 blocks over. Michael, with his innate mechanical sense, his eyes always scanning for hidden mechanisms and potential problems, had already spotted the source of Mr. Sterling's predicament. "Looks like a simple puncture," he murmured, his quiet voice surprisingly confident. "Probably a nail from that construction site on Elm Street." Jackson, always the leader, the one who weighed risk against reward, made a decision. They had nothing to lose, and perhaps a few honest dollars to gain. Dollars that could mean the difference between eviction and a roof over their heads, between pain and healing for their families. He approached Mr. Sterling cautiously, stepping off the stoop and walking towards the curb. His movements were deliberate, respectful, yet firm. "Excuse me, sir," Jackson began, his voice surprisingly steady, betraying none of the apprehension bubbling beneath his calm exterior. "Looks like you've got a flat. My friend here, Michael, he's pretty good with cars. We could probably help you fix it if you like. Quicker than waiting for a tow truck, probably." Mr. Sterling looked at them, his gaze sweeping over their worn clothes, their youthful faces, his expression a mixture of surprise and skepticism. He was clearly unaccustomed to such directness, especially from boys from this neighborhood. His world was one of appointments, scheduled services, and professional assistance, not impromptu roadside repairs by teenagers. "You?" he scoffed, a hint of dismissive disdain in his voice, his eyes lingering on Michael's worn sneakers. "You think you can fix this?" The question hung in the air, loaded with unspoken assumptions about their capabilities and their place in the world. Just then, as if on cue, Officer Hayes's patrol car slowly cruised by. He was making his usual rounds, a silent, omnipresent reminder of authority. His eyes narrowed as he saw the impeccably dressed Mr. Sterling talking to the 3 boys, a rare sight on this street. He slowed his vehicle, pulling slightly to the side, his posture radiating an implicit warning, making it clear he was watching. The subtle tension in the air thickened, a palpable current of suspicion flowing from the patrol car towards the group. Hayes's presence cast a cold shadow, a silent reinforcement of the stereotypes Mr. Sterling might already harbor. Jackson, unfazed by either Mr. Sterling's skepticism or Officer Hayes's silent scrutiny, simply nodded, his gaze unwavering. "We can try, sir. We've fixed a few tires around here for Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Gable. Got a basic kit back at Michael's place. It's not a big fancy one, but it'll get the job done." He glanced at Michael, who, ever prepared, had already retrieved a small worn canvas toolbox from his backpack, its contents rattling softly. Sensing Mr. Sterling's continued hesitation, and recognizing the fleeting nature of this opportunity, David, with his boundless optimism and disarming charm, chimed in, his voice bright and eager. "It'll be quicker than waiting for a tow truck, sir. Much quicker, and we're really good at it. Michael's a genius with engines." Mr. Sterling, clearly desperate and utterly frustrated by his predicament, sighed, a sound of weary resignation. He looked at the boys again, then at his expensive, immobile vehicle, then at the slowly circulating patrol car, and finally gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. "Fine," he conceded, the word clipped. "How much?" "Just whatever you think is fair, sir," Jackson replied, a glimmer of hope, fragile but determined, lighting his eyes. This wasn't about extortion. It was about earning an honest dollar, about proving their worth. And so, under the watchful, cynical eye of Officer Hayes's patrol car, which slowly circled the block like a predator, the 3 boys went to work. Michael, his usually quiet demeanor replaced by intense, laser-focused concentration, efficiently and expertly jacked up the massive SUV, his small frame surprisingly strong. Jackson, following Michael's quiet, precise instructions, expertly located the puncture, his fingers tracing the tire's surface until he found the offending nail. And David, ever the quick thinker and resourceful problem solver, used a clever trick with a small, inflatable toy, a deflated rubber duck he always carried, a relic from his younger years, now repurposed, to help quickly locate the exact source of the leak, blowing air into the tire while Jackson listened for the telltale hiss. Their movements were coordinated, seamless, almost an intuitive dance, a testament to years of quiet practice and teamwork, born from necessity, and forged in the crucible of their neighborhood's challenges. Within minutes, the tire was meticulously patched, inflated to the correct pressure using a portable hand pump, and gently, professionally, lowered back onto the ground. The entire process was completed with a surprising level of professionalism, speed, and quiet competence that belied their age and humble appearance. Mr. Sterling watched, utterly dumbfounded. He had expected fumbling, perhaps even an attempt to scam him, or at the very least a clumsy amateur effort. Instead, he witnessed genuine competence, an unexpected display of ingenuity, and a quiet, efficient teamwork that impressed him more than he would admit. He looked from the perfectly inflated tire to the three boys, who now stood before him, their faces streaked with grease but beaming with a quiet, hard-earned pride. They weren't asking for praise, merely awaiting their payment. He pulled out his wallet, ready to give them a generous sum, but as he did, he paused. He hadn't just seen a tire fixed. He had seen raw, untapped potential, quick thinking born from necessity, and a remarkable work ethic from three boys whom society, and indeed he himself, might have too easily dismissed. He had seen their genuine collaboration, their resourcefulness, and their quiet, undeniable determination to solve a problem. This was the boys' unveiling, a powerful, unbidden demonstration of their collective talents, their street smarts, and their inherent goodness. These were talents that defied the narrow confines of their struggling neighborhood and shattered the prejudiced gaze of onlookers like Officer Hayes. Mr. Sterling, a man who had built empires on recognizing value, instinctively recognized something profoundly valuable in these three young men. He saw not just a transaction, but an opportunity. The sweltering summer air on Liberty Street grew heavier, thick not just with humidity, but with a suffocating sense of dread. The boys' brief, exhilarating moment of triumph fixing Mr. Sterling's tire was quickly overshadowed by the chilling reality of their impending deadlines that now loomed like executioners. Their world, already fragile, always teetering on the edge of uncertainty, felt like it was crumbling beneath their feet. Their small, shared apartment, once a sanctuary, now seemed to press in on them. A small, suffocating arena where their desperate individual fights for their families' futures were silently playing out. The walls felt like they were closing in, each tick of the clock amplifying their fear. The pressure mounted with cruel, relentless precision, squeezing the last vestiges of youthful hope from their spirits. For Jamal's mother, the situation had gone from dire to catastrophic. A second, formal eviction notice, stark white against the faded paint of their front door, arrived. It was more than a piece of paper. It was a cold, legal threat, stating unequivocally that they would be displaced if 2 months overdue rent wasn't paid within 10 days. The stress exacerbated her migraines, confining her to a darkened room, unable to work, unable to fight. Jamal saw the pain in her eyes, a deep-seated weariness that terrified him more than any physical threat. He felt the weight of her suffering, the burden of being unable to ease her pain, and it was a torment far worse than any exhaustion he experienced. Simultaneously, the hospital contacted Michael's family again, the tone of their calls growing increasingly grim. His father's broken leg, a simple fracture that should have healed, wasn't responding to conventional treatment. An infection had set in, requiring a second, more complex surgery and an even more extensive, specialized physical therapy regimen. The cost, an additional enormous expense, now included expensive antibiotics and a protracted stay in a rehabilitation facility. All costs his meager basic insurance wouldn't touch. Michael listened to his parents' hushed, worried conversations, the fear in their voices chilling him to the bone. He watched his father, a man once strong and vital, confined to a bed, his spirit visibly dimming. The weight of his father's pain and the overwhelming financial burden pressed down on Michael, making his hands, usually so steady, tremble uncontrollably. He knew instinctively that this new complication meant an even larger, seemingly insurmountable sum was required. And for David's grandmother, Mrs. Evelyn Reed, the medical news was the most devastating of all, a cold, clinical prognosis that stole the breath from his lungs. Her aggressive pneumonia had taken a turn for the worse, escalating rapidly despite their best efforts. She now required an even more aggressive and experimental treatment plan. a last-ditch effort that offered a slim chance of survival, but came with an astronomical, previously unimaginable price tag. The hospital administrator, her voice devoid of compassion, delivered the final, crushing ultimatum over the phone, a conversation David overheard, his heart shattering with each cold word. A non-negotiable upfront payment of $25,000 was due within 72 hours to keep Mrs. Jenkins on the critical life support treatment list. Without it, they would regretfully have to transition her to palliative care, a euphemism for preparing for the end. 72 hours. 3 agonizing days to find a sum that felt like a king's ransom, a fortune that existed only in the dreams of their struggling community. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, the ground beneath David's feet giving way. The boys were utterly, terrifyingly alone in this fight. They had exhausted every conceivable avenue, every last flicker of a desperate idea. They ran through their mental Rolodex of odd jobs, but nothing came close to generating the kind of money needed. A few dollars here, a few dollars there. It was a trickle against a tidal wave. They even tried selling some of their few treasured possessions. Jackson's battered but beloved basketball, Michael's prized, albeit broken, vintage radio, David's collection of worn graphic novels. But the local pawn shop offered barely pennies on the dollar, their meager offers a mockery of their desperation. The memory of Mr. Sterling's brief gratitude, his elegant thank you, now felt like a distant, cruel mirage, a fleeting hope that had vanished as quickly as it appeared. He was a billionaire, yet he had simply driven away, presumably forgetting them as quickly as one forgets a minor roadside inconvenience. Officer Hayes, too, seemed to ramp up his scrutiny. His patrol car became a more constant, menacing presence, often slowing to a crawl as it passed their stoop, his eyes lingering on them with an almost predatory intensity, a silent, mocking reminder of their vulnerability. He seemed to sense their desperation, perhaps even to revel in it, confirming his preconceived notions. The unspoken message was clear: one wrong move, one act of desperation that deviated from the narrow path of their prescribed existence, and he'd be there to reinforce the rigid boundaries of their lives, to ensure they stayed in their place. The boys were physically and emotionally exhausted, sleep-deprived, and consumed by a cold, pervasive fear that gnawed at their insides. The specter of their family's suffering, the overwhelming burden of being utterly unable to help, bore down on them, threatening to crush their young spirits beneath its unbearable weight. The joy had drained from their days, replaced by a constant low thrum of anxiety. They were trapped, without options, without a way out. The final gut-wrenching blow landed with the brutal, precise force of a guillotine. A registered letter, official and unforgiving, arrived at David's small house, addressed to his grandmother from the hospital. The courier, an impersonal figure, simply handed it over and left, oblivious to the devastation he delivered. David, his hands trembling so violently he could barely hold the envelope, tore it open. The words, clinical and cold, blurred through his tears, each sentence a hammer blow to his heart. Due to the outstanding balance and the inability to secure the required deposit, Mrs. Evelyn Reed will be removed from the critical treatment protocol within 24 hours. This decision is final. We regret to inform you that no further extensions can be granted. Upon removal, the patient will be transferred to palliative care as per standard hospital policy. 24 hours. One single agonizing day. The final, irreversible countdown to losing the woman he loved more than anyone. David crumpled the letter in his hand, his legs giving out beneath him. A raw, guttural cry, a sound of pure, unadulterated despair, escaped him, echoing through the quiet house. Jackson and Michael, who had been waiting for him, rushed to his side, their faces mirroring his profound despair as he choked out the news, the words catching in his throat like shards of glass. They stared at each other, desperate, helpless, their minds racing in a frantic, futile search for an answer that didn't exist. This was it. There was literally nothing left. No more calls to make, no more distant relatives to beg, no more dreams to sell. They had exhausted every last ounce of their strength, every flicker of hope. They were at the very edge, clinging to their existence by the thinnest of threads, suspended over an abyss of inevitable loss. This was their collective hang-by-a-single-hair moment, a desperate precipice where their family's survival and their own futures teetered precariously on the brink of an irreversible fall. They had nowhere left to turn, no one left to call, nothing left to offer. The silence that followed David's broken sobs was heavier than any words, a testament to their absolute, crushing defeat. The cramped silence of the apartment pressed in on Jamal, Michael, and David, suffocating them with its despair. The hospital's cruel deadline echoed in their ears, a death knell for David's grandmother, and a symbol of their own crushing helplessness. Each tick of the battered wall clock felt like a hammer blow, counting down the last precious moments of hope. This was it, the breathless moment before all hope evaporated, leaving only the bitter metallic taste of irreversible defeat. The city outside, usually a symphony of life, had dulled into a muffled hum, an indifferent backdrop to their private agony. A sudden, unexpected sound ripped through the quiet despair, sharp and distinct against the heavy silence. Not the familiar worn rumble of an old bus, nor the clatter of a delivery truck, but the smooth, almost silent purr of a powerful, finely tuned engine. Then a soft, deliberate rap on their door, firm, but not insistent. The boys exchanged bewildered glances, their eyes wide with a mixture of dread and faint, flickering curiosity. Who could it be? They hadn't ordered food, and it was far too late for Mr. Jenkins to be making a social call. Their hearts, already raw with fear, pounded with a strange, nervous energy. Jamal, his lean frame rigid with apprehension, moved slowly towards the door, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for the knob. He pulled it open just enough to peer out. Standing on their modest stoop, starkly out of place against the peeling paint and cracked concrete, was a vision from another world. A gleaming, obsidian black SUV, the very same luxurious vehicle they had fixed days ago, its deeply tinted windows reflecting the fading afternoon light like dark, unseeing eyes. And beside it, tall and imposing, yet radiating an unexpected aura of quiet determination, stood Mr. Sterling, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that still looked as sharp as it had that day. His usually stern face, a mask of the unyielding capitalist, was softened by an unreadable, almost gentle expression. He held a slim, leather-bound briefcase in one hand. "Boys," Mr. Sterling began, his voice calm, deep, and resonant, cutting through the thick air of their anxiety. "May I come in?" Hesitantly, Jamal stepped aside, opening the door wider. Mr. Sterling entered their small apartment, his gaze sweeping across their modest, sparsely furnished living room. He didn't comment on its modesty, nor did he flinch at the visible signs of their struggle. His eyes took everything in: the worn couch, the stack of borrowed library books, the small, makeshift workbench in the corner where Michael tinkered. Instead, he reached into his inner jacket pocket, his movements deliberate and unhurried, and pulled out a thick, official-looking envelope. Not the slim one for payment he'd offered before, but something far more substantial. "I asked around," Mr. Sterling said, his eyes meeting Jackson's, then Michael's, then David's, his gaze unwavering and direct. His tone was not one of accusation or judgment, but of profound understanding. "After you helped me that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to your story. I made a few discreet inquiries. I found out about your families, about your mother's migraines, the loss of her jobs, and your eviction notice, Jamal. About your father's accident, Michael, and the denied workers' compensation, the second surgery he needs. And David." His gaze settled gently on David, who stood frozen, barely daring to breathe. "I found out about Mrs. Jenkins's condition, and the impossible deadline you're facing for her treatment." He paused, his expression solemn, his eyes conveying a surprising depth of empathy. "I understand you have only 24 hours left." He placed the thick envelope carefully on their worn coffee table, its weight seeming to settle the dust around it. "This," he stated, his voice quiet but firm, "is for Mrs. Jenkins's surgery. All of it. Every last cent she needs for the critical treatment protocol. Plus," he added, pushing a second, smaller stack of crisp $100 bills from his jacket pocket onto the table, "enough to cover your overdue rent, Jamal, so your family can stay in your home. Enough for your father's specialized physical therapy and rehabilitation, Michael, and to cover your lost wages until he's back on his feet. and some additional funds to help all your families get back on their feet and stay there. David, unable to process the words, unable to believe his ears, snatched up the thick envelope with trembling hands. Inside was not just a check, but a cashier's check, made out directly to the hospital for the full $25,000, along with a significant stack of crisp $100 bills for their individual family needs. It was real, tangible. Mr. Sterling. But why? David whispered, his voice cracking, tears already blurring his vision, the overwhelming magnitude of the gift almost too much to bear. Why? Mr. Sterling echoed, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips, a rare human expression on his usually unyielding face. Because you three showed me something that day that money can't buy, something I rarely see in my world of high-stakes finance and cutthroat ambition. You showed me ingenuity. You showed me resourcefulness. You showed me hard work, without complaint, without expectation. And you showed me a damn good heart. When I, a man with limitless resources, was utterly helpless, and everyone else saw only inconvenience, you three, with next to nothing, saw an opportunity to lend a hand. You didn't ask for much. You just quietly got the job done. I saw your potential that day. I saw your integrity. And I refused to let it go to waste because of circumstances utterly beyond your control. He then produced 3 crisp, elegantly designed business cards, each bearing the discreet silver-embossed logo of Sterling Innovations, along with his direct line. He placed one in each boy's hand. And these are for you. When you're ready, reach out. There's always room for talent and good character at Sterling Innovations. I'm building a new department focused on urban revitalization, and I believe your unique perspective would be invaluable. This was it, the breathless moment of profound, utterly impossible salvation. The kind of miracle that only happened in movies, not on Liberty Street. David, overwhelmed by the sheer, unexpected generosity, crumpled to the floor, the check clutched to his chest, his sobs of relief echoing through the small room, raw and unashamed. Jackson and Michael, equally overwhelmed, could only nod, tears streaming down their own faces. The tension of months finally breaking, replaced by a flood of unspeakable gratitude. They were saved. Their families were saved. The emotional catharsis was abruptly interrupted. A loud, insistent rap on the door, followed by the familiar heavy thud of footsteps. It was Officer Hayes, his face stern and suspicious, framed by the doorframe. He had clearly seen the black SUV parked outside their apartment building and, ever the skeptic, ever the protector of the established order, had come to investigate, convinced he was about to uncover some illicit transaction or a crime in progress. He pushed past Jamal without waiting for an invitation, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly as he saw Mr. Sterling, the renowned billionaire, standing inside the modest apartment. His gaze then fell, inevitably, on the envelope and the stacks of money on the coffee table. "Everything all right here, Mr. Sterling?" Officer Hayes asked, his voice suddenly stripped of its usual gruffness, laced instead with an uncharacteristic deference that bordered on nervous respect. His eyes darted nervously between Mr. Sterling, the money, and the 3 boys, his mind clearly struggling to reconcile the scene before him with his preconceived notions. His usual abrasive tone was gone, replaced by a guarded formality in the intimidating presence of the billionaire. He had always been so certain of what he knew, of who these boys were. This shattered his certainty. Mr. Sterling turned to Officer Hayes, his expression cool, composed, and utterly unyielding. There was a quiet power in his stance, a subtle, almost imperceptible challenge. "Everything is perfectly fine, officer," he stated, his voice carrying an undeniable authority. "In fact, these young men just received a well-deserved investment in their futures and a critical medical payment for a beloved family member." He gestured towards the cashier's check on the table, its value radiating even to the uninitiated eye. Thanks to their remarkable abilities and their innate kindness, Mrs. Jenkins will be getting the life-saving care she needs. A fine example of what happens when you empower local talent, wouldn't you agree, officer? Sometimes the most valuable assets are found where you least expect them. Officer Hayes's jaw dropped. He stood there, thoroughly flummoxed, his preconceived notions, all his ingrained biases about these boys and this neighborhood, shattered under the weight of this undeniable display of generosity and integrity from a man of Mr. Sterling's stature. He mumbled something unintelligible about community outreach and good to see positive interactions, his face visibly paling as he realized he had misjudged the entire situation, and indeed these boys, profoundly. The air crackled with the irony of his presence, his silent judgment a stark contrast to the genuine compassion and recognition that had just taken place. He had spent years seeing these boys as potential trouble, as statistics, as products of their environment. Mr. Sterling, on the other hand, had seen potential, character, and genuine human value. Officer Hayes, utterly outmatched and profoundly humbled, quickly retreated, backing out of the apartment. The stark contrast between his cynicism and Mr. Sterling's visionary generosity, a silent yet powerful rebuke. He had witnessed a power far greater than his badge. The undeniable force of true merit, unexpected kindness, and the shattering of prejudice. Within the hour, Jamal, Michael, and David, still tear-streaked but now beaming with a joy that felt almost illicit, made the calls. The hospital administrator, initially dubious, then astounded, confirmed Mrs. Jenkins's surgery was back on, scheduled for the very next morning, her voice now brimming with deference. Jackson's mother called back, sobbing with relief, her voice choked with gratitude at the news about the rent and the end of her family's immediate crisis. Michael's father, despite his pain, managed a weak but genuinely grateful laugh on the phone, his spirit visibly buoyed by the prospect of healing and rehabilitation. The apartment, once filled with the suffocating weight of despair and the unspoken fears of a looming catastrophe, now vibrated with unrestrained joy, a symphony of relief, hope, and overwhelming gratitude. The boys, still reeling from the whirlwind of events, looked at Mr. Sterling, who still stood by the coffee table, a quiet, almost tender expression on his face. "Mr. Sterling, we don't know how to thank you," Jamal said, his voice thick with emotion, the words barely audible. Mr. Sterling simply smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed his usually stoic features. "You just did, boys. By showing me what you're capable of. The true thanks will be in what you do with this opportunity. This isn't charity. It's an investment in potential, in character, and in a future I believe you will build, not just for yourselves, but for your community." He looked at each of them, his gaze filled with quiet encouragement. "Remember, it takes more than money to build an empire. It takes vision, and it takes heart. You all have both in spades. Don't ever forget that." His departure was as smooth and silent as his arrival. The black SUV glided away, melting back into the city's anonymous traffic, leaving behind not just a substantial sum of money, but a profound sense of vindication and a glimmer of hope that would forever alter the trajectory of their lives. A black teen had taken the hand of a lost old woman, and that simple act of compassion, rooted in true character, had led to a black SUV showing up at their house the next day, changing everything. Not just for Jamal and his friends, but for their entire community. The sleek black SUV had vanished as silently as it appeared, melting back into the urban hum, but its profound impact vibrated through their small apartment, slowly, surely replacing the suffocating despair with a profound and fragile sense of peace. The air no longer thrummed with unspoken anxieties. Instead, a quiet, almost disbelieving joy began to settle in, a warmth spreading through the once chilled rooms. It was the calm after the storm, a gentle stillness that allowed them to finally breathe deeply and without fear. And the transformation was swift and palpable, unfolding with a speed that still felt miraculous to the boys. The hospital, once a bastion of bureaucratic indifference, now communicated with deferential tones, confirming that Mrs. Evelyn Reed's critical treatment was not only fully funded, but already underway. David's grandmother, her frail hand now holding his with renewed strength, was showing remarkable signs of recovery, a living, breathing miracle that brought an immediate wave of relief to David and his family. The shadow of palliative care, that euphemism for the end, had been utterly banished. For Jamal's mother, the immediate crisis had dissolved. The overdue rent was settled, the stark white eviction notice now a crumpled, discarded relic of a nightmare past. Her migraines, though still present, seemed less frequent, less debilitating, as the crushing weight of financial strain lifted from her shoulders. She smiled more, a genuine, relaxed smile that Jamal hadn't seen in months, and the lines of worry around her eyes began to soften. Jamal watched her, a quiet gratitude blooming in his chest. Michael's father, too, began his arduous but now hopeful journey to recovery. The specialized physical therapy, once an unattainable luxury, was fully covered, and the best therapists in the city were working with him. Michael saw his father's spirit rekindle, his determination to walk again infused with a new sense of possibility. The absence of financial worry allowed his father to focus entirely on healing, a priceless gift. Michael, seeing his father's progress, found himself drawn back to his tools, his precious robotics projects, his hands no longer trembling with anxiety but with renewed purpose. The crushing burdens that had weighed down their young shoulders had suddenly, impossibly, been lifted, leaving them feeling lighter, more hopeful than they had ever dared to imagine. Officer Hayes, once a formidable, cynical symbol of the systemic hurdles they faced, underwent a subtle but significant shift. The story of Mr. Sterling's astonishing intervention and the undeniable integrity of the boys that prompted it quietly but firmly made its way through the local precinct. It was the kind of story that circulated in hushed tones, challenging ingrained perceptions. Hayes's usual cynical vigilance around Liberty Street noticeably lessened. He still patrolled, it was his job, but his gaze was no longer accusatory or suspicious. It was replaced by a more nuanced understanding, a reluctant but evident respect. He began to see the resilience, the potential, and the inherent goodness in the neighborhood, not just the perceived problems or the potential for delinquency. He often offered a brief, almost deferential nod when he passed the boys, or even a curt, respectful wave from his patrol car. It was a small change, but a profoundly meaningful one, signaling a shift in perspective that had once seemed impossible for a man so entrenched in his views. He recognized, however reluctantly, that his long-held assumptions about kids like them had been fundamentally, spectacularly wrong. The boys, once bound by shared struggle and desperate hope, now found themselves united by shared opportunity and an expansive vision for their futures. The experience had profoundly shaped them, cementing their bond and sharpening their individual focuses. They had learned in the most dramatic way possible that kindness could come from the most unexpected places, and that their inherent talents and good character, once hidden or dismissed by a society that often judged them by their zip code, held immense, undeniable value. They hadn't just received money, they had received validation, a powerful affirmation of their worth, and a belief in their potential that had been largely absent from their lives. Jamal, with Mr. Sterling's implicit encouragement and the weight of worry lifted, began spending more dedicated hours at the local library, devouring books on urban planning, sustainable design, and community development. His notebooks, once filled with fantastical sketches, now contained meticulously researched blueprints for their own neighborhood, merging his childhood dreams with practical, impactful solutions. Michael, his focus unwavering, found himself completely immersed in robotics. With access to new, higher-quality tools and an array of online courses Mr. Sterling quietly arranged, his small room rapidly transformed into a full-fledged workshop, a symphony of whirring gears, blinking lights, and the satisfying hum of new circuits coming to life. He wasn't just fixing things anymore. He was building, creating, innovating. David, vibrant and energized by his grandmother's recovery, poured his boundless enthusiasm into delving even deeper into coding. His screen, once a playground for simple games, was now alive with nascent game designs that blended engaging storytelling with powerful community-building themes, dreaming of creating digital spaces that inspired and uplifted. Months later, on a breezy autumn afternoon, the boys sat on their usual stoop, but this time, the conversation was no longer about survival. It was filled with bright, ambitious plans for their futures, their voices animated with the energy of possibility, not the quiet hum of worry. The suffocating fear was gone, replaced by an invigorating sense of purpose, a shared excitement for what lay ahead. "Can you believe it, though?" David mused, a wide, almost incredulous grin on his face. He leaned back against the warm brick of the building, his eyes sparkling. "Mrs. Reed's not just out of the hospital, She's actually planning her next garden, and she's baking again." Michael nodded, a small, contented smile playing on his lips as he meticulously worked on a tiny circuit board, his fingers moving with practiced ease. "And my dad's getting stronger every day. He even talked about helping me build a bigger workbench. Said he wants to learn some of this robotic stuff himself." Jamal looked out at Liberty Street, no longer seeing just faded paint and cracked asphalt, but a canvas for his future designs, a community ready for revival. He saw potential, where before he had only seen limitations. "Mr. Sterling, he didn't just give us money, he gave us a chance, a real one. More than just a handout, it was a hand up." He paused, a thoughtful look in his eyes, the weight of the realization settling in. "We still have to work for it, right? Harder than ever. But now we can actually build something real, something that matters." A deep, profound sense of peace settled over them, a feeling unlike any they had known before. It wasn't merely the absence of immediate challenges or the relief from financial strain. It was the exhilarating presence of hope, the unwavering belief in a future they could actively shape. They knew their journey was just beginning, filled with hard work, new lessons, and inevitable setbacks. But now, they had the tools, the support, and most importantly, the self-belief to truly soar. This was their new calm, a serenity born not from escaping a storm, but from finding their true potential and daring to dream bigger than their circumstances had ever allowed. The old woman they helped, in her lost vulnerability, had opened a door to a future they could only have imagined. 5 years later, Liberty Street pulsed with a newfound vibrancy, a living testament to transformation. The faded storefronts that once spoke of neglect now gleamed with fresh paint, small businesses hummed with activity, and the joyous laughter of children echoed from a newly renovated community center that had once been a crumbling, abandoned building. Jamal, Michael, and David, no longer just teenagers navigating a challenging urban landscape, stood tall as respected young men, their youthful dreams having blossomed into tangible, impactful realities that were reshaping their entire community. They were living proof that potential, when nurtured, could change the world around them. Jamal, his quiet intensity now channeled into profound purpose, was a rising star at Sterling Innovations. He wasn't just an employee, he was a driving force. Leading a specialized department focused on sustainable, community-centric urban development, Jamal's projects were transforming neglected city blocks into vibrant, livable neighborhoods. His designs meticulously incorporated green spaces, community gardens, and beautifully designed, affordable housing units. He championed local labor and materials, ensuring that the revitalized areas benefited the very people who lived there. His work was featured in architectural journals, earning him accolades, but his true reward was seeing the light in the eyes of families moving into homes he had designed, or children playing in parks he had envisioned. He had built more than structures. He had built hope and opportunity, literally laying the groundwork for a brighter future. Michael, his innate mechanical sense honed by years of dedication and Mr. Sterling's resources, managed a thriving robotics club at the renovated community center, inspiring a new generation of engineers and tinkerers. His classroom was a cacophony of whirring motors, blinking LEDs, and excited chatter as kids built their first robots. Beyond the club, Michael's own innovations gained recognition. His creations ranged from adaptive technologies for the elderly, such as smart walkers with fall detection, to engaging educational robots now used in schools across the city, making learning about science and engineering fun and accessible. He patented several of his designs, his quiet genius blossoming into impactful inventions that improved lives. He taught with patience and passion, seeing reflections of his younger self in every curious face. David, ever the charismatic and energetic one, had successfully launched and expanded his nonprofit, Game Changers. The organization taught coding, digital literacy, and, crucially, digital storytelling to underprivileged kids from across the city, not just their neighborhood. He believed that technology could be a powerful tool for empowerment and self-expression. His curriculum encouraged students to create their own narratives, to build their own digital worlds, fostering not just technical skills, but critical thinking and creative problem-solving. Game Changers was celebrated for its innovative approach, partnering with major tech companies and universities to expand its reach, giving countless young people a voice and a pathway to careers they never thought possible. David, a natural mentor, filled his classes with laughter and encouragement, his bright eyes alight with the joy of seeing his students flourish. The Sterling family, particularly Mr. Sterling himself, remained a steadfast, influential presence in their lives. He was more than a benefactor. He was a true mentor, a wise-sounding board, and a silent but powerful champion for their individual and collective endeavors. He often spoke of the boys as the heartbeat of his philanthropic efforts, their genuine drive, passion, and integrity, inspiring him to invest more deeply in community development initiatives across the nation. He recognized that their success was not just about charity, but about a smart investment in human capital. Mrs. Evelyn Reed, fully recovered from her illness, was not just alive, but thriving. Her vibrant spirit, once dimmed by sickness, now shone brightly. She was a cherished volunteer at David's Game Changers Center, her gentle wisdom and endless supply of heartwarming stories a comforting, grounding presence for the young coders. She often brought in freshly baked cookies, and her quiet encouragement meant the world to the kids. Officer Hayes, having undergone a complete transformation from his cynical shell, was now a familiar and genuinely welcome sight on Liberty Street. His patrol car, once a symbol of apprehension, now evoked nods of recognition and friendly waves. He had become a genuine advocate for community policing, organizing local youth programs and fostering trust between law enforcement and residents. He often stopped by the community center for a friendly chat with Jamal, Michael, and David, or to offer quiet advice to the kids. His past prejudices had been replaced by a deep understanding and hard-earned respect for the people he served, acknowledging the profound impact that a change in perspective could have. He was no longer just an officer. He was a part of the community, seen as a true protector. One sun-drenched autumn afternoon, a large, joyful crowd gathered in the newly revitalized community park, a sprawling green space that Jackson had designed with meticulous care. The air was filled with the aroma of food trucks, the cheerful melodies of a local band, and the uninhibited laughter of children exploring Michael's interactive play structures, and a large outdoor digital storytelling exhibit curated by David's students. It was the annual Liberty Street Festival, a vibrant celebration of renewal, collaboration, and the enduring spirit of their community. Jamal, Michael, and David stood on a makeshift stage, looking out at the diverse, joyful crowd that stretched across the newly paved pathways. Mrs. Evelyn Reed sat proudly in the front row, a triumphant, almost beatific smile on her face, her hand waving slowly. Mr. Sterling stood quietly at the back of the crowd, his posture relaxed, his eyes beaming with quiet satisfaction as he observed the thriving community he had helped nurture. Even Officer Hayes was there, off-duty, sharing a slice of pizza and a genuine laugh with Mr. Jenkins from Big Mike's. The two men, once unlikely companions, now bound by their shared appreciation for the young men before them. Jamal stepped forward, his voice clear and resonant, carrying easily across the park. 5 years ago, he began, his gaze sweeping across the transformed neighborhood, a panorama of vibrant life. This place was different. We faced challenges that seemed insurmountable. Our families were struggling, and the weight of it felt impossible to bear. He paused, a genuine warm smile gracing his lips. But then, an act of unexpected kindness, and a particularly stubborn flat tire, changed everything. It showed us that potential isn't limited by circumstance, and that with a little help and a lot of heart, anything is possible. Michael stepped up to the microphone, his hands clasped, his voice gaining confidence with each word. He gestured to the vibrant park around them, to the children playing, to the community members mingling. This park, this community center, these programs, they're not just structures or lines of code. They're a symbol of what happens when we invest in each other, when we believe in the dreams of our young people, no matter where they come from. They're a testament to what a community can achieve when it works together. David, brimming with his usual infectious enthusiasm, concluded, his voice ringing with passion. We got our second spring because someone, Mr. Sterling, saw past our struggle to our potential. He saw us not for what we lacked, but for what we could become. And now, it is our collective mission, our deep commitment, to make sure every kid on every Liberty Street gets their second spring, too. To create spaces where talent flourishes, where dreams aren't just whispers in the dark but roars that echo through the world. As the applause swelled, a powerful, emotional crescendo that vibrated through the air, the boys stepped down from the stage, immediately surrounded by grateful smiles and warm, affirming embraces from their community. They looked at each other, their eyes reflecting the incredible, arduous, and ultimately triumphant journey they had shared. From a broken tire and desperate hope to building a brighter future, not just for themselves but for countless others. Their story was a profound testament to the transformative power of a single act of kindness, a moment of unexpected connection. It proved unequivocally that light always finds a path, even in the deepest darkness, and that unseen heroes, empowered by vision and compassion, can indeed alter destinies, igniting a second spring for an entire community. If this story stirred your heart and reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining the journey.